this schedule really shapes up for a playoff run with a 12-team playoff.
Areas that, you need to get from experience, which is just, hey, I need to make quicker decisions.
How do you define success for this team?
National championship.
What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here of the Cover 3 College Football Podcast, and this is my summer school series where we try to rip through as many D1 teams as we can possibly record in May and June. And today, it's a big one. College football playoff contender, South Carolina. Got Hale McGranahan here from the Big Spur. What's going on, dude?
Not a whole lot. Just trying to see if this team can pick up where they left off in November, sans that bowl game at the end of December.
By the way, you're not in a hostage situation right now. You're in the middle of moving. So
Yeah.
just for all of our awesome YouTube subscribers, just wanted to point out he's okay and doing this of his own free will. So 9 wins last year. I mean, fringe playoff contender. I thought like if things had broken in a slightly different way down the stretch, could have made it in a real leap for the program. I imagine the vibes are pretty immaculate right now.
Very high, very, very different than they were a year ago when I was hanging out with you, having this little chat that we do every summer. People are fired up, and what Lanorris Sellers did down the stretch in November, in addition to what they did with the defense. Even though they lost quite a few guys on that side of the ball, there's still a handful of talented players returning, and same defensive coordinator. And but yeah, it starts and ends with Lanorris Sellers and what he was able to do those last 5 games of the regular season.
And you nailed that defense last year. We'll get to that in a second, but let's talk offense. So Dowell Loggins leaves, offensive coordinator. I thought did a better job than at least maybe some of the fans on the Big Spur when he was first hired thought he was going to do, just based on my reading of it. But a familiar face in Mike Shula takes over. What sort of changes should we expect with Shula, who he was already the quarterback coach, right?
Yeah, I don't think there'll be like wholesale changes across the board. Obviously, there will be some subtle differences because each play caller has his own deal. But like you said, he was around last year and was the assistant quarterback's coach, if you will, and was the guy who was on the field with Lanorris, looking him in the eyes every game during the regular season last year because Loggins called plays from up in the booth. So they got to know each other quite well throughout the course of last season, and Shula called plays in the bowl game, and there were a whole host of reasons why offensively it wasn't the best performance. Certainly wasn't along the lines of what we saw through the month of November. But yeah, I mean there will be some differences maybe with some of the quarterback run game and how that's designed. There could be some changes that way, but I think like any offensive coordinator at any school in the country, they want to continue to do what they did well last year and try to build off of that and see where that can take them this upcoming season. So I'm sure there will be some wrinkles when we see these guys playing in Atlanta against Virginia Tech, but for now, I think it's safe to say that it'll look pretty similar to what we saw last year.
It was so cool to see Sellers develop down the stretch. I mean, it was like he was just progressing before our eyes, and part of that's probably him getting healthy after he hurt the ankle in whichever game that was. I'm trying to remember. But where else can you see him progressing this year?
Yeah, so he had a rocky start with the injuries, if you remember. So he had the second game of the season was against Kentucky, and he got banged up in that game, and he came back in. Then by the time he really got back onto the field, it was pretty one-sided. He didn't even have to play in the fourth quarter. The following week was the LSU game where, like you said, he hurt his ankle, so he missed the second half. So he lost a good bit of playing time because he was trying to get healthy. Then he comes back and has to go against that Ole Miss defense, which was really talented, obviously. So, yeah, as far as answering your question, Bud, I think for him it's just maybe cleaning some things up with his footwork. And he did a much better job of taking care of the ball. That first month or so of the season, he fumbled a lot, threw some interceptions, which again, he got better at that as the season played out. So there's probably just some mechanical type of stuff that's probably a little bit above my head in terms of me being able to sit here and talk about it. But I think that he's just kind of looking to refine some of those things. and obviously it would have started this past January. Then getting comfortable with the guys that he's going to be throwing the ball to. I mean, there are going to be a lot of freshman receivers who we see throughout the course of the season, in addition to like Nick Harbor and Mazio Bennett and some of those other guys who were around last year. So kind of a whole host of things, but really at the end of the day, you just kind of want to let him go out there and just be himself and play free and cut it loose, which when he's doing that, it's pretty special to watch.
Indeed. So you mentioned receiver. Is there a guy on this team who could emerge, or who you expect to emerge, rather, who's going to get the majority of targets? Last year, when I was watching them, I felt like they were kind of force feeding Simon, who, like, by my eye, was a kind of a hybrid, tight end receiver type. But with him gone, is there somebody who you think is going to emerge as kind of the go-to guy for South Carolina?
I think Nick Harbor is probably at the top of a lot of people's lists if they're answering that question. Like, the fan base is really fired up about him heading into this season, and for good reason. I mean, he really came on last November and started making plays. You could just see it. He was a much better wide receiver than he was at the beginning of last season, and some of that was because he was still running track. I mean, he qualified for the U.S. Olympic track and field trials last summer and declined that opportunity after the NCAAs were done, because he was like, all right, I need to get back with football. He hadn't done any football really all last year up until August. So now he's been all football here in 2025, went through spring practice, which he hadn't done in his college career up until this year. So I think that's probably the most obvious answer, Bud. Mazio Bennett, who was a freshman last year, played a lot out of the slot. I think he's going to be better just because he's a year older and that type of thing. Then I mentioned the freshmen who, and there are a lot of them, and most of them that were with the team for spring practice this year. So, then you mentioned Josh Simon as a tight end, and the guy they brought in from the portal, Jordan Dingle from Kentucky, who to me is pretty similar to Josh Simon and the skill set. So it could be any number of guys, but I think it's safe money would be on Nick Harbor at this point.
I'm interested to see how much rotation they do in the month of September. I mean, if you look at this, Virginia Tech to start and South Carolina State, and then 3 SEC teams who are in the bottom 5 in terms of odds to win the conference with Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Kentucky, before like a decidedly tougher stretch of teams comes with LSU, Oklahoma, Bama, Ole Miss, A&M. Do you think like one of the freshmen could emerge as the top guy if Harbor doesn't take another step? Obviously, I think the ideal case is Harbor, right? Because the guy's an absolute like freak show.
Yeah, I mean it's very possible. I mentioned Jordan Dingle, and obviously he's not a receiver, but I really like what he could add potentially. Like I said, I made the Josh Simon comp, and if you look at his stats from Kentucky, they aren't great, but Kentucky somehow was really good at receiver over those years while he was there, but weren't very good on offense. But yeah, I mean the one freshman, if I had to pinpoint a freshman right now, I couldn't even just say one. I would probably look at a couple, whether it was Malik Clark, who was highly rated 4-star coming out of Rock Hill High School, originally committed to Florida State before Carolina flipped him, or Brian Rowe, who's from the Charlotte area, who is, Bud, I don't know if you've watched many of Brian Rowe's dunks from high school basketball on Twitter, but if you have a second, look those up. And they're not just like him doing it in gym class wearing Crocs, which he does have some of those, like they're in-game dunks too. I mean, he's super explosive and looked really good during the spring game, and by all accounts, since he's gotten here in January, has been awesome. So I could see it being one of those two guys, or it can be Donovan Murph, who's coming in from Irmo High School here in May. There was a time not all that long ago when it was really concerning at that receiver position for South Carolina, whereas now it's like tons of upside, tons of excitement. They're just really young and obviously unproven. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did.
Yeah. Okay, great.
They've got a lot of options for sure. Let's talk run game here. Obviously, you mentioned some potential changes to how they're going to run the quarterback, going from Loggins to Shula. Shula, of course, worked with Cam Newton in Carolina for a while. But Rocket Sanders and Attaway are gone. Who are we taking here in the backfield? Is there going to be a bell cow? We think it's more of a committee approach. Who do we like here?
Well, Attaway's back. He's got one last
back.
season. Yep. So he'll be in that conversation for sure. I don't know if there would necessarily be a bell cow. If Rasul Faison, the Utah State transfer, if he's granted the waiver to play this fall, and as we sit here on May the 8th when we're recording it, that's still up in the air. But if he's cleared and able to play, I think it's possible that he's that guy. But just sort of my take on things is assuming Faison's in the mix and Attaway is obviously back. I don't know that there will necessarily be a guy who's like a quote unquote bell cow. Definitely not to the extent of Rocket Sanders and what we saw from him last season. I think it could be either of those two guys. Jawarn Howell, who transferred in before last year from South Carolina State, has done some good things during his time here, and Matthew Fuller, who was a freshman last year, redshirted, didn't play a whole lot. I mean, he's got lots of potential as well. So I could see it going in any number of directions. And as we sit here right now, it could be like a hot hand situation. Just whoever's playing the best is going to get the touches down the stretch from one week to the next. But I'm sure there are some people who are out there listening to this right now are saying it's none of those guys. The bell cow would be Lanorris Sellers as that go-to guy as a runner. For sure.
Although I'm sure there's going to be with the eye on the playoff. If you do get there, you want to win a ball game, obviously. So maybe keeping him healthy as best they can. Maybe just run him a little more in the big games. But we'll have to see how that plays out. All right, so let's go ahead and hit a break. Well, no, not a break yet. Let's talk offensive line for a second. We feel like this is a unit that could show some more improvement this year?
Potentially. I mean, it's, around here, that's kind of a sensitive subject because, 2 years ago on Spencer Rattler's final season here, it was just so bad, quite frankly. And
that was when that was tackle in the spring game?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, that was a pretty brutal season up front. And a lot of that was because of injuries, and they had to basically roll out a new starting five every week that season. But there were signs of improvement down the stretch in 2024. It wasn't super awesome all the time, but you know what? They've got starting left tackle coming back, and Josiah Thompson, who was a freshman last year. Kason Henry, who started every game at right tackle, is back. And if he can stay healthy, I would think that those are going to be your two tackles again. And I think every coach, regardless of level of football, would be pretty fired up about having their starting tackles back from one year to the next. So that's a good spot. I think they're going to be in a pretty good spot there. They've still got a bunch of younger, talented guys who are competing inside at those three interior positions. And just like they did before 2024, they went to the portal and got a bunch of veteran guys who are going to come in and compete and potentially win starting jobs at either guard spot or the starting center spot. Those are all vacated from last year. So very much a work in progress there, but I think they're relatively confident. The coaching staff is relatively confident that they'll be able to find the right five, whether it's in week one or eventually throughout the course of the season. I think they feel like they've got the pieces to get that ironed out and get it right so Lanorris can maximize his ability.
I like what I'm hearing about this offense. Let's hit a break, and on the flip side, we'll talk a little Gamecocks defense.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, guys, welcome back in. We are talking South Carolina here on the Cover 3 College Ball Summer School Series. Okay, so this defense last year was ridiculous. I mean, there were weeks where my own personal rating system, I had them as like a top 3 or 4 defense in the entire country. That front was basically unblockable. I think sneakily here, South Carolina lost, and I don't know how many people track this, but I do because I'm a nerd and whatever. It's summer. We got time to track stuff like this. They lost 9 undrafted free agents, I think. And most of them were on the defensive side. Does that sound right? Like this team was talented.
Yeah.
You nailed it.
Yeah, they were really old last year. And I think, I don't think I know. I mean, Shane Beamer said it a few times during press conferences, like with Kyle Kanell, for example. They were fired up about getting him from Georgia Tech, thought he was going to come in and start and be a difference maker and all that great stuff. They did not envision him doing what he did, being one of the best defensive linemen in the country. He surprised them for sure with how well he played. Maybe some of that was a result of having Dylan Stewart come in and be a stud immediately. I mean, but most of the time, like 5-star defensive ends come in and like they don't exceed the hype. Like they if they live up to it, like that's considered like a good thing, right? Well Dylan Stewart played beyond that, and he was awesome, and I think really helped Kyle Kanell ascend to the type of player that he became last year. Then the other one who was, again, like a guy that the staff was real fired up about and they thought was going to be a good player for him was Demetrius Knight at linebacker, who was arguably the best player on that defense. And I say that having just mentioned Kyle Kanell and Dylan Stewart, and haven't even talked about some of the guys they had in the secondary. So, and there had plenty more old guys who were 5th and 6th year players in that front six who played a lot and made some big plays for them over the course of the season. And then they had old guys in the secondary too. So it was front to back. It was a fun group to watch. And I think probably aside from like the just superstar individual play was just how well they played together as a team, playing just a fun brand of defense to watch if you really appreciate that type of thing.
So of all the studs this defense lost, who are you most confident that they can, if not replace or improve, like maybe they can improve upon some of these guys they lost, but like of all the really good guys they lost, who are you most confident they can actually like not have a big drop off or potentially even improve upon?
That's a tough question. Maybe Nick Emanworry, who played safety for most of his career, played some in nickel early on. And I say him because they've got Jalen Kilgore back, and Kilgore he's been a starter since he was a freshman. He's about to be a junior. He played nickel and did some really good things. He's played safety, so they could potentially slide him back to safety. And just depending on how they want to get lined up and try to match up with what they're facing week to week, they could have like Kilgore at safety and slide like Brandon Cisse, for example, the NC State transfer who's probably going to start on the outside at corner. He could play nickel if they feel like that's a matchup they need to roll with. So I would say Emanworry, even though he was, again, arguably one of the better players on the defense and was a second-round draft pick, they've got some good pieces returning in Kilgore and Peyton Williams, who has played some over the years, then brought in a guy like Cisse, who's more of a corner, like I said, but could kind of help out with what they do and being flexible and how they want to go at it from one week to the next. So those are some exciting options that they've got, and they're pretty fired up about as a staff.
3 linebackers, it looks like. I don't know how to pronounce this name. Justin Okoronkwo,
I believe.
Okoronkwo. Okay, that sounds better.
Don't hold me to it. I could have butchered it myself. They just call him Jo around here. I don't think anybody's real anxious to try to put their spin on it. And
then Jerron Willis, who I do remember a lot as a recruit. Some teams were telling him he could play safety, and other teams were like, "Bro, you're built like a linebacker. You probably need to play linebacker eventually." Are those the 2 guys for South Carolina back, or who else are contention?
So there are two other guys who are in contention. Fred Johnson, who was a freshman last year and was kind of a rotation guy. He played a decent amount. He's sort of the next man up among the returning guys. I'd probably say more so than Jaron Willis. Then Sean Murphy is the other transfer they brought in with J.O. Murphy began his career at Alabama like J.O. did, but Murphy spent last year at Florida State, and they're really excited about him too. So between those names that you and I have pieced together here, Bud, I think it'll be those four who are the primary guys who are playing. Because as we saw last year, that they used a pretty steady rotation at linebacker, and I think they feel like that's a good way to go about it, especially if they've got talented guys who are worth putting out there. But in the interest of keeping guys fresh and maybe utilizing some of the different types of skill sets, I think it's going to be those four in whatever combination it is from 1 week to the next. But yeah, I think Fred Johnson is definitely among the handful of returning guys, and there aren't many of them at that position. He's definitely at the top of the list.
All right, so if I'm game planning for South Carolina, I have got to get Dylan Stewart blocked, and I'm probably going to double him. Is there somebody on the other side who's ready to step up and kind of take advantage of the single blocks that they're likely to see?
Well, that's going to be an interesting question to get answered at some point later this year. I mean, Jaylen Brown, who they brought in from Missouri, was someone who they kind of penciled in as a guy who could be the answer to that question. But he got hurt during the spring, and his status for the fall is a little bit of an unknown right now. Then Brian Thomas Jr., who is entering his senior year, which is kind of crazy to think that he's already played for Carolina for 3 years. He was the next man up last season. So whether it was Kennard or Stewart coming out, the next guy in was Brian Thomas Jr. And he had a pretty productive season. He's not the biggest guy playing defensive end. I mean, he's like at 6'2", 245, 250, but he plays so hard and he's tough, and he's fun to watch because of those things. Like he's just such a just a relentless type of player. So he'll definitely factor into that. Then they have some other guys coming back too, and Jatius Jeer, who's been around for a couple years now after transferring in from Syracuse, and Desmond Umeazulu, who's entering his third season with the program, was highly recruited coming out of high school. So they've got some options, but as we see here right now, I think Brian Thomas Jr. is probably the best answer. And they've gone to the portal this spring and getting George Wilson, who began his career at Florida State, played the last couple years at Campbell, and Damon Clowney, who's pretty well traveled himself during his college career, for guys who could come in and contribute within the rotation.
Is there a guy on this team, and we can't say quarterback because that's basically cheating, and plus he's already basically there or close to it. Is there a guy on this team who either, hey, if he finally reaches his potential, or maybe if he arrives a year earlier than expected and plays up to what he could be just a year earlier than I think most of us projected, that really changes the fortunes of this team?
The playing up to the potential aspect of that question, I would say it's definitely Nick Harbor.
Sure.
Just because he's such a big physical specimen who's one of the fastest players in the country. He's definitely my answer for that side of the question. As far as playing up to or I guess being a year ahead of schedule, maybe Fred Johnson, who I mentioned a little bit ago at linebacker, just because they lost so much of that position. If he can come in as a sophomore and play anywhere close to that replacement level with guys like Demetrius Knight and Debo Williams and Ben Martin Scott, who've since departed the program, if he can be anywhere close to that, that would be pretty massive too, because that's the heart of your defense, and they lost so much in that area.
Absolutely. All right. So with this schedule, I mean, it looks a good bit easier than what last year's was, although the names are the same, just the locations are flipped for the most part. How do you define success for the Gamecocks in 25?
Personally, I would say So the win total I think is what, 7.5? Is that kind of where the numbers are at?
Yeah,
right
it looks
now?
like 7.5, 8, somewhere around there.
So for me, just my opinion, if they can top that, whether it's 8, 9, 10, whatever, I think that would be a good sign. And I'm sure there are some Carolina fans out there who are like, "Not forget that, man." Like this team was knocking on the door the playoff last year. Like they need to kick it down and break through, especially if Lanorris Sellers only has one more season with this program because he is draft eligible after this year. But for me personally, because it's a tough. I think it's a little tougher schedule than last year, Bud, because they have to go to LSU, they have to go to A&M, they have to go to Missouri. Which I mean, for really since they've been playing Missouri, South Carolina has somehow managed to play their worst game of the season when they have to go to that Columbia. So that's a tough place for them to play. And got to go to Ole Miss. So for me, that's a little tougher on the schedule, just given the places they have to go this year compared to last year. So I don't know. I could certainly hear your side of that case and agree because Bama's coming in and Clemson's at home and all that. But for me, if they can win 8 or not, if they can repeat with nine wins again, I think that would be a successful 2025. But maybe there's some people out there who are like I said, nah, this needs to be a top 12 team in the country by the end of November.
I know we're all going to be watching. We'll be following your great coverage there on the Big Spur, man. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure.